Mr. Culpepper is the CEO and principal agent for Mid-Michigan Health Insurance Advisor. He is a member of the National Health Underwriters Association, National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, and Independent Agent Association. He currently works with individual, small, mid-sized, large group employers and governmental agencies, including school districts, with emphasis on healthcare reform, solutions, and strategies. So let me at this time introduce to you Mr. Eric Culpepper.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. A lot of stuff going on with healthcare reform. One of the things I want to touch on today is, and one of the reasons I'm going to have you hold your questions until the very end, just in the interest of time. I'm going to try to get through a lot of information in about a half an hour worth of time. At the end of that, I'll have about a 15-minute Q&A. Okay? You guys have a nice little lovely handout. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through this because rather than me just expounding you guys with a whole lot of information that 5 minutes after you walk out of the door, you won't even remember half of it. What's important is that you're going to have resources available to you where you can be able to go online and you can be able to click these links, put them in your browser, and save them and archive them for future reference. Okay, so let's talk about Obamacare. There's three things that now has changed under Obamacare, which is really pivotal. These are the hot topics. And one is when you're going to be able to buy your health insurance under Obamacare, how you're going to be able to buy it, and what you're going to be able to buy. Let's talk about what you're going to be able to buy in the healthcare exchanges under Obamacare. Cost is going to go up concerning health insurance premiums because now they're more comprehensive than what they were before in the past. And let's talk about what makes these plans more qualified as health plans under healthcare reform. One of the things is that you have something which is called EHB, which is essential health benefits. Let me explain what that means. There's 10 parameters that now are built into health plans that will deem them as being qualified. One is all plans have to include maternity. All plans have to include prescription drug coverage. I'm going to tell you in a minute why this is important. They all have to include ambulatory services. They include child wellness services. They include preventive services. They include a myriad of different components that are now going to provide you more coverage than there ever was before. Just say, for instance, if you were an individual and you were without insurance and you had to go and you had to get your own individual health insurance, and you had a wife that was pregnant, or you guys were expecting a kid, and you had to pay for that maternity service or a rider to be built into that policy for you, you would pay an additional $300 a month on top of your major medical policy just to have the maternity included. So all these essential health benefits, and you're going to hear the term minimum essential benefits going forward in the future. And that means that all these components must be present in these plans to be deemed as qualified health plans now. So what that means is that, yeah, cost is going to go up, but you're going to have more coverage. Something else that's happening now with these individual plans, it's a guarantee issue. What guarantee issue means is that if you had a pre-existing condition before and you showed up and you tried to get a policy, that carrier could just claim, they could decline you right out and just say, you know what, we're not going to provide coverage to you because you got too much risk assessed behind your medical condition, so we're not going to cover you. That can no longer happen anymore. The other problem was lifetime maximum benefits. Say most, if I ask you guys to raise your hand as to how much you think a heart attack or heart transplant or any of those type of major surgeries would cost, most people doesn't really have any idea how much that stuff costs. It runs in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what carriers would do is they would cap how much money they would spend in terms of how much they would expense for your medical services. That's no longer the case. Under the new healthcare reform, it means that you will have no lifetime minimum maximums anymore. So even if your cost went $5 million or more, the carrier cannot drop your coverage and they cannot increase your rates. That's another provision under the Protection Act. Now what's really nice is that before, if you were a small business owner and you said that I have to get health insurance, what am I going to do? And you didn't have access to group, and you may have had a pre-existing condition. You were just out of luck. There was no way that you could be able to get health insurance, because if you did, they would deem you too much of a risk and you were. So what were your options? Well, you could go to Blue Cross. Blue Cross Blue Shield was like the only safe haven in the state of Michigan where you could actually go and get coverage. Well, the Blue Cross actually just recently, they submitted a bill to the state where they're no longer a for the people, by the people type organization anymore. They're not a state-sanctioned government entity. They're a mutual insurance company just like everyone else, because you know what? Dan Loeb, which is the CEO of Blue Cross, he came to this wise conclusion. He said, you know what, it's a level playing field now. We are out there in the marketplace, just like everyone else, competing in this marketplace now that's called the exchanges or marketplace. So now, Blue Cross, you're going to be able to go to them and get the same plans that everyone else is offering. Now let's talk about the plan options. The plan options that we're going to have, Obamacare is going to use something which is called a metal tier program. The metal tier is basically plan options that you can be able to select to enroll in, and they're using a metal tier based on bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, or what have you. Each one of these carry a percent of how much the state will pick up in terms of cost, or the carrier is going to pick up in terms of cost. So if you're looking at a bronze plan, it's going to pick up 60% of your medical costs. If you're going to go up to a silver plan, it's going to be 70% of the cost, and so on and so forth. You go all the way up to a platinum plan, it's going to be 90% they're going to pick up the cost. So you can be able to elect for which plan option fits in with your budget and your design. Now here's the nice thing about it. Everyone is going to have an opportunity to be able to qualify for something which is called a tax credit. Now this is the first time it's ever happened in human history, because up until this point, corporations got subsidies, not individuals. So I just want you to understand and brace yourself for the fact that this is something unique that's never happened before. So what does this mean is that when the exchanges open up in October, yourself or your employees will have an opportunity to be able to go online, and they can be able to apply and go through an application process. During that process, it's going to ask them a set of questions and eligibility and qualifications. First of all, it's like you can't be incarcerated. There's some guidelines and criteria. You have to be a resident of the state that you're applying for medical services for. There's a litany of things that it's going to ask them. But based on those questions, and based on their income background, they're going to be able to qualify and know right away how much of a tax credit that they're going to be able to receive from a month-to-month basis to help offset the premiums that are coming. So for a young person, for instance, that's 25 years old and they don't have any insurance, they're making about $25,000 a year, they fall within 133% of the poverty line, they will qualify for a $265 credit per month. So let's say, for instance, they wanted to go to a silver plan. Well, that silver plan costs like $330. Well, you know, they're going to be paying a little less than $100 a month out of their own pockets to be able to pay for their health insurance. And that's how it's going to work in the future. One of the things I want to talk about is a little bit about some of the challenges that are coming with the Obamacare. And then I want to talk about the primary reason that I'm here. I want to talk strategy. I want to talk about solutions about what you need to do as an individual, and especially what you need to do as a small business owner to be able to protect yourself and provide the type of quality benefits for your employees. Now, one of the reasons why Obamacare came into play is because, first of all, insurance companies were getting away with murder as far as we're just going to take in payments and minimize how much we're going to send out in claims. That's not going to happen anymore under the Patient Protection Act. The other thing is that small business owners, which I hit the hardest because they have so much to contend with as a small business owner. The cost is going up, the cost of doing business is going up, revenues are shrinking because of the state of the economy that we're in. So they're just saying, you know, we're just gonna go without, we're just not gonna have group benefits. And so what happens is, that employee gets sick, get hurt, something happens, they're going in bankruptcy. If you Google it and you look at it, you'll see the #1 reason for bankruptcy is because of medical services expenses. People can't afford it. And they're showing up at the hospital saying, I don't have any insurance, what am I supposed to do, but I have this condition. And that was happening all over the United States, not just here in Michigan, everywhere. So that was one of the reasons why it came about. So now we have the compliance piece of this, which is rolling out for small business owners, which just recently, one of the compliances is that because small businesses typically don't offer a group plan to their employees, it's rolling out now where the state is saying you have to provide a notification to your employees. This is the most recent, there's more coming. This is the most recent where you have to provide a notification to your employees saying that by October 1st, they have an opportunity to be able to migrate out to these exchanges and be able to get their health insurance. Okay, I'm going to talk about one of the challenges now for individuals. The individuals now have an opportunity to be able to go out on their own and be able to get their health insurance through these exchanges. Part of the problem is that by January 2014, everyone must be covered. You must have some type of health insurance. Can't be without, otherwise it's going to invoke a penalty. The penalties right now that are going to be assessed, they're minimal. But the penalties that are coming by 2016 are going to be heavy. And they're just not for the individual. The heaviest of these penalties that from what I've seen, is going to be with the children. It's going to be upwards, by 2016, it's going to be upwards to $265 per child with a cap of $5,000 per individual. So it's a lot of money out of pocket just for one individual to not have their kids covered. But I'm going to give you some strategies here in a minute as to why you should never have your child without coverage. Should never happen. Because there's going to be minimal cost when you cover your kids. Almost absolutely nothing. And it's going to be monumental in terms of providing medical service for them when they're getting their immunizations, to everything else if they need to get their shots, what have you. The wellness piece is going to be very big, and children are going to pay a very big part of that. And if not, there's going to be some extremely heavy penalties around that. We're going to talk about some of the challenges with businesses, because with business, you got large group employers, you have small group employers. The large group employers, they're in the jackpot, because if you have more than 50 full-time equivalent employees, there is a litany of regulations and compliances around a large group that you must comply with now. In order, there's going to be some heavy penalties. There's several penalties coming for large group employers if they don't play along with the new employer mandate. Small businesses, they have a little bit more latitude. And I think it's a pivotal moment in history for small business owners, because one thing is that, first of all, it's no cost for them to migrate their employees out to the health exchanges. Now, as a business owner, if you had to go and get health insurance, there's costs associated with buying health insurance. You go out, you find your trusted advisor, because it's a high trust occupation, you want to have someone that's got your confidence, and you purchase a plan and you get health insurance. Here's the difference, is when you have an agent that you're working with to migrate your employees out to the exchanges, there's zero cost. There's a cost of money now. It's like go find an attorney and say, can I hire you for free? Probably not. But here's the wonderful thing with hiring a gentleman such as myself or other state-sanctioned brokers, is that you have an opportunity where you can have that advisor work with your employees on your behalf and become your benefits department. And there's two things that that individual is going to do for your company. One is that individual is going to make sure that you are compliant in every area of the law concerning the employer mandate. The other thing is that they're making certain that your employees are being represented correctly with getting the benefits, so that they're not paying more than they have to, because part of our role, you look in this little pamphlet that I gave you towards the back, And there's a reason I put this in here, and it's talking about the designation in roles of a navigator. Because you have assistant planners, there's different roles that individuals can take with, providing education and helping people understand what this is all going to be about in the healthcare exchange. It's an article from Community Catalyst, and it just talks about the different roles and what we have to go through, some of the state certifications, things. It's pretty rigorous. And understanding and knowing what's happening with all the different healthcare legislation and how this is going to roll out, how it's going to play a part, so that we can be able to come out and do an education seminar, things like this, to help people understand what they can be able to do. But more important is, I will tell you, I am probably the most untapped resource for small business owners that are out there in the marketplace right now. Untapped. Because what I find, there's two things that are happening. When I talk to small business owners, they'll say, well, I've got all of that covered. I've sent out my letters. I've done all of that already. My employees know everything. And I'll just say, okay, why are you doing that? Because now you have navigators that are certified by the state. And mind you, we have to go through a pretty strenuous background check and everything else to make certain that we're on the level with providing this type of information and material to business owners. So my first question is, like, why are you doing that? You already have so much on the plate with managing and conducting your business. It's like you're taking on another burden that you don't have to. And that's the one thing that I preach to business owners, is that you need to be reaching out. And you have several agents around the city, like Steve Phillips with W.J. Phillips, and Jamie Youngston with Black and Monroe, and there's several more. But these individuals like myself are helping the business community migrate and make this transition for them and their employees to this thing that we're calling healthcare exchanges now. And it's almost, I always do the analogy like you have a car, you take it to the shop, and you say, I need to have my car repaired, and then you put on your coveralls and you get under there and you start tinkering and fix it, and your mechanic standing back saying, okay, well, why are you doing that when you have someone who can do that for you? It's the same concept. The other thing is that I've seen employers, like I said, there's a lot of, there's some people are emotionally wounded over all of this because the way it came about, it just dumped it on us. And it's affecting me as well as everyone else. And so they're just immobilized. They don't want to do anything with it at all, and that's a mistake. Because I give the analogy that's like having your pet on one of these electronic leashes. And they think they have all the freedom in the world until they get to a certain point, and then zap, they got you. So it's so important to make sure that you're abiding by every letter of the law, because there's something that's rolling out for small business owners as well, which is called a non-compliance fee. The non-compliance fee is a catch-all. And I've sent this out to a couple of my clients, and some of them appreciated it and some of them didn't, but it's just my job to inform. I always say, don't kill the messenger. I'm just putting information out. But one of the things is what that non-compliance piece of it is, by 2018, there's going to be a excise tax. It's a Cadillac tax that's going to kick in. We're all going to start picking up the cost. We're all going to start picking up the cost by 2018. So what does that mean? Cost is going to go up exponentially for health insurance, especially around this excise tax. If you don't pay your excise tax, it could carry some penalties upwards to $100 a day. And that's for a small business owner. That can be pretty hefty for a small business. There's other things that are coming that are still being rolled out. The way you have to think about this right now with Obamacare, the framework for this has already been built. It's like putting up a house. You've got the frame in, but they're still running the conduit and they're putting the windows in. There's still things that have not rolled out yet. And those things that are going to roll out may impact you negatively if you're not aligning yourself with someone who has the knowledge to be able to protect your company and your employees concerning this healthcare legislation. One of the things I wanted to point out is I have a resource sheet in here. You go to the top, it says business, individual, and families. And this here, this here is your arsenal, guys. This is an arsenal of information. As I mentioned before, if you don't have a trusted advisor that you're working with currently right now, you need to have this handy. Because this is all the information that you're going to need. And I would say the majority of the information that you will need in order to stay abreast. If you're just one of those people that I want to know all this stuff, I mean, great, makes great bedtime reading, puts you right to sleep at night, I guarantee. But if you want to know this stuff, this have the links to tax calculators, how subsidies are going to be computed, talks about the legislation, some of all these other things that I've been telling you about that haven't rolled out quite yet, it's still coming. All this information can be at your fingertips. It's just a matter of archiving it in your browser and just saving it so then that way you can be able to click on and go that you need. Somebody come to you and say, hey, what about this situation that may be coming up? We can go to this resource and get that information. Now, one of the things that I will make available to you as well is I have this form electronically. And if anyone wants me to email this information to you, just makes it easy. Then that way you can just click the links and go there and you can save them in your favorites. Just make sure that I have your business card, and I would be happy to get this information to you. Okay? Let's talk about large-scale businesses and how this is going to play out for some of the larger businesses with 50 employees or more. I'm going to start putting my solution cap on. I'm going to start talking about strategy now. We know the challenges. We know it's coming. We know that it's here. I want to start talking about what we can be able to do to be able to safeguard ourselves as individuals as well as small business owners and even large business owners. The large business owners are going to get impacted the most. And I don't know if you've heard, but the penalty has been delayed. Starting in 2014, businesses that decided that we're just not going to play, we're going to pay instead. We're going to pay the penalty. The taxes that were, the penalties that were coming along with that legislation is extremely heavy. They moved that out now to 2015. Okay. A lot of the large businesses are thinking we can wait until 2015 now. That's not the case. The government's using a look-back approach. They're using a 3-year look-back approach. This stuff started rolling out back in 2012. So it doesn't mean that, oh, okay, we have our heyday. We can just wait until, you know, the shoe drops in 2015. There are things that large businesses need to be doing right now to make sure that they are ahead of the curve before all of this starts rolling out. Very important, because now it's no longer where they're just looking at, 30 hours a week constitutes a full-time employee. No, they're using 130 hours in a 90-day look-back approach to be able, it's a sliding rule to look at full-time employees now for a large group employer. There's things that's going to tie in with payroll for a large group of employers because you're going to have to know who showed up and worked in real time. So it's different. That's why I say if you're not advocating a broker, you're just kind of like out there in the wind because there's too much stuff to know. And if you think you know it all, it's like, think again, because there's just too much, and it's changing daily for us. So here's one of the strategies that I believe, and this is just a world according to Eric Culpepper, okay? So don't quote me on this, but this is where I see that the whole future of the business is going for healthcare. I believe that in the future, companies, organizations, large group employers are going to have something which is called a defined contribution. It's an HRA. I believe there's going to be a form of defined contribution going on in every company and business and organization out there. Period. Let me explain what a defined contribution is. A defined contribution is really an HRA. It's a health reimbursement arrangement. But it acts in the same way. Years ago, if you're old enough, you'll remember back in the 60s and 70s, companies offered pension plans. They were actuarially going bankrupt trying to, because people were getting older and everything else around these pension plans. They couldn't afford it. So what they did is they switched, they did a paradigm shift. And they went from defined benefit to defined contribution, and that is what's happening right now. It's no longer trendy, this is the norm for businesses. How is it gonna work with a large group employer? Well, there's three things that's happening in the exchanges. You have the shop that I had mentioned once before. You have something which is called a public exchange, and you have something which is called a private exchange. They're all exactly alike, they're no different. The only difference is with shop, it's set up where it looks and feels like it's a group to an employer, okay? If you're doing a public, you're just getting a tax credit. And if you're doing a private, it's exactly the same, it's just it doesn't carry any type of tax credits with it. It's just a private exchange. Some carriers are electing to go this direction because it's going to be a less financial risk for them to be able to do a private exchange rather than go into public exchanges, because they all believe that there's going to be just a myriad of people coming in on the front end of this with a lot of health issues and risk. So how is this going to play a part for large group employers? Well, for one is that we believe that large group employers are going to begin to migrate to doing a form of an HRA coupled with doing the private exchanges. And how that's going to, we've already seen it right now in a lot of major corporations that carry more than 200, 500 upwards, employees. Why they're doing that is because, first of all, with an HRA, it's a Section 105 medical reimbursement plan by the IRS tax code, so it carries some really heavy tax incentives for an employer and for the employee. Now, typically in the IRS code, you don't normally see where it's giving an incentive for both employee and employer, but that HRA, it's like on steroids. It's giving that employer that tax deduction while it's giving a pre-tax benefit to the employee. Why the HRA is going to be a great component is because it enhances the benefit package, because when you set up an HRA, you're basically saying it's not insurance. You're just saying we're going to give an allowance to our employees so that they can go out and they can purchase their health insurance. Now, to a large group employer, they're already going to have their group plan. But here's what's happening. When they raise their deductible, because everyone wants to go to these high deductible health plans. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's killing the physicians, because when patients show up to pay their bills, it's subject to co-insurance and deductible. Well, if that deductible is $5,000, well, they're on the hook for that $5,000. So what's happening is they're saying, okay, we're not going to put all that employee exposure on our employees anymore. We're going to gap that with an HRA. So they put that HRA in place, okay, and it takes the burden off of that employee somewhat. But at the same time, it makes their plans now qualified, affordable under the healthcare reform. So it's a twofold approach. They're going to raise their deductibles. Large group employers are going to raise their deductibles somewhere around $2,500 upwards. Then they're going to gap that with an HRA to be able to pick up those other out-of-pocket costs for their employees. And then what they can do is, some employers may forego doing a group plan altogether. I have one company currently right now that doesn't have, they got over 250 employees and no group insurance. They can elect to send their employees out to these private exchanges and get their health insurance that way for their full-time employees, and they can circumvent paying penalties under Obamacare doing that. Now, here's the catch. You cannot prohibit any of your employees from not going to the public exchanges. But here's the thing is that these companies, they understand that you can always change the status of an employee. And that's what they're doing. It's unfortunate, but it's happening and we're seeing it. It's not a trend now, it's normal. So what they're saying is, we're going to set up a defined contribution. We're going to agree to give you so much money a month to go out and buy your own health insurance. And we're going to give you this tax break with that. Okay, what we're asking though is that you don't go in these public exchanges to acquire your health insurance, because if you do, we get penalized as a company. We can't afford that. But if they say, okay, well, you know what, I can elect to go out of the exchanges anyway and just try my luck at getting a tax credit, and you can do that, and they can show up next month and they're going to be from a full-time status now down to a part-time status. I'm going to go ahead and end it right there because I think I'm up on my half an hour. Am I right?
Close.
Pretty
Pretty
close?
close, yeah.
I'll go ahead,
So open up a Q&A.
I'm gonna go ahead and open up a Q&A because I think I gave a lot of information already. And as I mentioned before, you have your handy dandy resource sheet in there. And again, if you wanna,
My question is, how does this affect nonprofits?
Can you repeat the question so the whole room hears, please?
yeah, you said how does it affect nonprofit organizations? It's gonna work.
Like churches.
Like churches.
That have employees.
It's gonna work exactly the same way for a nonprofit organization as it is for a corporation, small business, or whatever. The thing is, with churches, you guys are you're a non-taxed entity. Okay, so the only difference is that there should be any excise tax that I mentioned. You're not gonna be subject to that. And in any type of healthcare plan or anything like that. So the taxes will be offset for you. But it's gonna work as far as the enrollment, application processes and what have you, all of that's gonna work exactly the same.
So are you saying that if we don't offer that to our people, tell them to go get it, we can be hit by the government?
Because you're a nonprofit, tax exempt entity, you're not, no. You're not gonna have any repercussions from that whatsoever. You're just gonna send your people out as a courtesy because if they don't have health insurance, you're just helping them now to be able to acquire affordable health insurance now. That's it. That's it. Anybody else?
You said that parents were going to be held accountable to cover their children. How does that work in conjunction with the groups being required to keep the children of the employees covered up to 26?
Right, that's gonna change. Because,
That's
well, they can keep their children on their plans up until they're 26. And even if that child gets married, have a job, going to college, whatever the case may be, they can still stay on their parents.
Some companies are grandfathered in though, correct? I believe GM is one of those.
It's gonna be grandfathered up until a certain point. Now, if they stay, the plans stay qualified, you know, under these components that I mentioned, the essential health benefits that's now built in, they can keep those plans to the duration. Nothing's going to change. But if those plans don't meet the qualification, then they're gonna have to drop coverage and get one of these other newer plans that are gonna be coming out by 2014. But the nice thing, I'm glad you answered that question, because the nice thing about this is that children are gonna have a different option. It's called CHIP, and that's the Children's Health Insurance Program. And the Children's Health Insurance Program, it's different. But it's got the baby wellness, it's got all of that, because prevention is gonna be the big key here going forward in the future. So it's to a parent's benefit to make certain that they have their children covered. And I'll just throw this point out real quick. I have a friend of mine, she runs a foundation for screening children with heart conditions because she's lost a child to a heart attack very early in life. And the young man was only like 16 years old when he had this fatal condition, we thought. She has the hardest time getting parents to understand, you need to go and get your kids screened. She go out to these schools and to the athletics department and she tries to get them screened. Very few people will listen to her. And one of the reasons why is because they were always afraid that, oh, now my rates are going up, or pre-existing condition, or, you know, I can't afford it. But now, with this new act coming out, it still covers the child for pre-screening. It falls under the wellness category. And this is something I had a conversation with her the other day. I said, now parents should be more apt to take their kids in and get them screened for these types of conditions because there's no onus. Because before, like I mentioned, if it was subject to a deductible, the doctor didn't want to touch it because you had to get a referral. And the doctor didn't want to have to chase his money for that pre-screening that costs, you know, $200 or $300 or whatever. So now that's covered under wellness. It's a moot point. Take your kid and go get him checked out. You know, him or her, go get him checked out, and then that way you just know. And it's not going to be any onus or out-of-pocket expense for the parent to have that procedure done. Okay. Yes, sir.
How is this going to affect veterans that are receiving benefits from the VA?
Right, that's a good question. What's going to happen is when you fill out the application process, you're going to have a litany of questions. One of them is going to ask you if you're a veteran. Okay, you click on that button, it's going to give you another set of options. And what it's going to do is, because this thing is going to navigate, it's going to direct you in different areas based on how you answer. And so what it's going to do is it's going to require you to actually contact your VA administration for benefits. So if you're not maximizing, if you have a DD 214 or whatever, say like if you got out of the service and you have your service jacket, your record, they're gonna request that information to see like time and grade and time in service and all of that other stuff. And then you can be able to look and see how much benefits you can get through the VA. But then you can also couple that, because if it doesn't offset enough of your costs, then you can still apply for additional assistance to be able to pick up your costs even more so.
Oftentimes when there's questions about ACA, people always say, go to healthcare.gov, go to healthcare.gov. I was just downstairs at a summit on low literacy and low basic skills. So how does an employer help an employee who might not be computer literate navigate?
Well, that's where, supposedly, in a perfect world, that's where I was supposed to come in, but I'm far and few between. And you bring up a really good point. This is one of the, this disconnect, because everyone does not have the aptitude to understand all of this stuff. It's confusing. It's a bit much for me. So we have an advocacy program for people with learning barriers and language hurdles and things like that. That we can be able to supposedly take them to these channels to help them understand, and it's a little bit more work on our part, but it's to help them understand all of this stuff and what their options, because at the end of the day, it's just all about understanding what your options are.
To your point you just made about the role you play as a navigator, is your organization like a nonprofit or are you a for-profit organization? You said you're funded, so there's no cost to anybody to come to.
No, there's no cost, and you bring up a good question, because that was one of the conditions that the state was looking at, is how do we want to deem these navigators? How do we, what's the comp? We want somebody to be, third party, bipartisan, not, take one side or the other. And then it came down to, a lot of these agents like myself, they said, boy, this is a lot of work on the front end. Can't cost justify not doing it. So a lot of agents, quite a few of them, just said, you know what, we're opting out. So much work, a lot of stuff to be done, educating people. Folks are resisting this stuff. We're just not doing it because it's too much work. We're just not gonna do it. The thing is that the way it came down now as far as the comp, they're gonna do something that's called a per member per month type basis. And we still don't know what that is. They'll give us a certain dollar amount from the state to be able to navigate individuals to these marketplaces, and then we'll get paid on those bases. The biggest thing that I try to leave you guys with more than anything is that we're the greatest resource. Because like I said, myself and others who are like me are diehards. We've gone through the tunnel and out the other side.
So are you geographically based, for instance? Do you cover a certain part, or can any?
We can go anywhere. We can do things through our websites. We can go out on site. We can do community services with educational seminars. Quite a few things that we can do that way. But it just comes down to, because as I mentioned, there's few of us. More will be. I think there's a lot of, instead of having early innovators, you got a lot of late adopters that are coming in. And I think it's going to justify it, because even though I'm giving up so much on the front end of this, on the long term, it's going to make up in volume because everyone needs it. And so I think in the long run, absolutely. So, anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank the Chamber for inviting us. We are new to the area, and I had a question about, I actually am hiring and training and teaching some people in Grand Blanc, and so, but most of them are contracted or 1099 employees, and so they may not have healthcare coverage already. How do they go about, they may have a desire to get it, how do they go about if they're not attached to an agency, they're not an employee, they're not in the church, how do they go about actually receiving whatever benefits are available to them?
Okay, that's a good question. 1099 employees are wonderful.
Yes,
for this type of platform. Yeah, but this is type of platform. It's an excellent platform for a 1099 employee, and here's why. Because, as I mentioned before, like we were talking about HIPAA and COBRA and all this other stuff that goes along with group benefits and things like that, You don't have any of that with a 1099. It's like, go out and buy your own insurance, and that's how this is set up. So you're basically just saying, you know what, you will contract, you'll hire someone like myself.
Okay.
And you would say, okay, we have X amount of 1099 employees that we want to be able to migrate out to these exchanges so that they can be able to get affordable health insurance.
Right.
And then what I would do is, most agencies, we have a form letter. And all it does, it protects you as a employer, and it protects your employee. It just basically states that we have been giving, hired to be able to help them migrate. Now, this is the thing, your 1099 employee, they can say, well, you know what? We're just gonna go out on our own. We don't wanna have to, and that protects you. Because now, they're free to do whatever they want to. It's just basically saying, we have contracted this company to help us migrate our employees out. And you can elect to work with who we contracted with. But that employee can do pretty much whatever they wanna do.
Right, well, excuse my ignorance, where do they go out on their own to go? Do they go
Well,
to
it's a website.
healthcare.gov or?
As the gentleman mentioned, healthcare.gov.
Healthcare.gov
That's gonna be your point of
is where the person
contact.
will
You
go.
go in there, you start an application process, it asks you your questions, and then it'll qualify you, and then it moves right on through the process.
Okay. And how long, I'm sorry, I just figured I'd get a moment. How long is the process from opening the application till I can actually go to the doctor?
Okay, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Right now, the way it works is October, we have an open enrollment period. The open enrollment period is gonna go from October to March of 2014. This is why it's so important, and I can't impress enough with small business owners that they need to be looking at this stuff now as opposed to later, because from October to January, that's all qualification and eligibility processing. In January, they're gonna have to requalify again, so they're gonna do another assessment to see if your income hasn't changed between now and then. Because see, again, folks, this stuff is all based off of income. And so at that point, the tax subsidies are gonna kick in. So if you're qualified for $250 a month, $300 or whatever, by January, those tax credits will begin kicking in. So you will elect your plan, you go in and choose it, and then it'll offset whatever the difference is for your plan. And that's basically how it's gonna work. But right now, you need to get in to see what you qualify.
Just to carry on.
I'm sorry.
She said,
I'm sorry.
Just real quick, you mentioned in the interview that Michigan is behind. When will we find out the exact date that enrollment will open?
We're looking at probably the second week of October, but the information that I gave you in that resource center on healthcare.gov, and there's some other great websites, will keep you abreast of when things are coming out from Michigan. So you got that, Andy. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question about credits, subsidies, all of the different things that you've mentioned. So, say for instance, you go out and you have, maybe it's a 1099 employee, they go out there and they find out, based on what they qualify for, they're supposed to get a $200 subsidy. Is that direct, or does it come on the back end as a tax credit? So in other words, does it happen every month, like every month?
It happens every month.
So that subsidy happens every month?
Yeah, something happens.
So what comes out of pocket for that person is the difference?
Exactly.
Okay. That's great.
And see, that's where I mentioned, like if a company wanted to be able to set up, like I mentioned, an HRA, a defined contribution, because these plans are only for major medical. Hospitalization, that type of stuff, lab and x-ray, it's not gonna cover for dental, and it's not gonna cover for vision. So if you wanted to say, I wanna have a full benefit packet, you can offer, and what's nice about an HRA, it's a name your own price type allowance. So if you wanna give $20 a month or $30 a month, so your employees can actually go out, so now they will have their major medical covered through the healthcare exchanges, and then they can elect to go out and get their own vision or dental through.
Dental's not included in the exchange, and neither is.
No, it's not. It's up to, for a child, it's what we call pediatrics dental. For a child up until 12 years old, it's covered.
Okay.
After that, you're deemed an adult, and you have to go out and buy your own dental insurance. And that's why I believe that, defined contributions, HRAs are gonna be really pivotal in the future with providing this additional health and wellness type benefit option for employees.
I might have missed part of the first part. When you've got folk that are in between, like a 22-year-old who doesn't have any insurance, what happens with them?
22-year-old, the young people, they're gonna be required to still have health insurance. They can elect though, when you're young, if you're under 30 years old, you can elect for something which is called a catastrophic plan. The catastrophic plan is real cheap. It doesn't carry can't get a tax subsidy with it. But a young person can elect for that if they're fairly healthy and they don't wanna pay much. So this way, if they get this catastrophic plan, it's credible, comprehensive, credible coverage, and they're not gonna be subject to a tax penalty. Okay.
If they're not working, don't have any revenue, they can't pay a bill. So what happens?
What's gonna happen is, okay, bring up another good question. See how there's so much stuff with this. If you, you can file for something what's called hardship case. If you've been out of work and you haven't had a job and you don't have any taxable revenue or no income coming in, the government's not gonna expect you to pay a tax penalty. They'll waive it, but here's the thing. They can waive that until the following year. So if you have a tax credit obligation or a tax debt obligation that you couldn't satisfy this year, sometime it could be waiting for you for the following year.
What happens then if that person has an accident and goes in and they don't have the coverage and they didn't pay the penalty? Is that all gonna fall onto the taxpayers?
Well, there's two different things happening now. One is government, the other one is hospitalization, okay? If you show up, say in January 1st, you have a major incident, you go to a hospital, you need medical services, you have no insurance. Two things are gonna happen. One is that the hospital can say, do you have $3,000 in your bank account to cover the service right now? No? Okay, go get health insurance. And they're gonna direct you to somebody like me. Because I'm like DHS, I'm HHS, I'm all of that, CMS. I'm plugged in with all of that now. They're gonna say, go find that guy and get insurance.
Unless it's emergency.
So with the tax part of this though, it just means that if you have an obligation and you didn't pay it or you couldn't pay it, they can offset it. So if you can't pay it right now, they're not gonna require you to pay it. They can expunge it, or they can waive it, or they can put it out until next year. So there's a couple of different ways that the government can handle that.
My question, this might sound kind of naive, but who's gonna pay for this? I mean, if a person has an accident, they have no insurance, they have to have the care.
Right.
Who's gonna pay for this? The taxpayers?
That's a good
You're
question.
paying for it now for Medicaid right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so they still have the Medicaid and the Medicare, it's still gonna be.
We do. There's different channels. There's different channels. Okay. Let me answer this
Can't
question.
hear it too good now.
You're still gonna have individuals that are low income. They're gonna be able to get assistance from the government, from Medicaid. Medicaid is actually gonna be expanded. We now know that Snyder agreed to allow Medicaid expansion for the state of Michigan. How that will work is people that fall below that 100% poverty line, they will be eligible to be able to qualify for Medicaid. So like you're saying, if you have an accident, well, the state's picking up. They get money that's allocated just specifically for that, for those individuals who cannot cover or afford it. Now what's nice is you don't pay a penny towards that Medicaid. It's 100% paid plan under the state. Now, the other part is that, okay, you fall within 133, you have a job, you're working, you say, well, where's all these tax subsidies coming from? That's a lot of money to be doling out. Well, that money is coming from large corporations. You know, companies like GM, who just said, oh, I'm gonna opt out. So we're gonna pay this penalty. And so that's where that money is coming from to be able to offset the cost for the taxes.